For vacuous centrism, see Rory Stewart and ask him about his bow. For calculating, simple and easy to digest centrism, look no further than Boris. Forget Brexit, I know you all wish you could, and concentrate for a moment on the good old-fashioned political positioning of Boris, and therefore the Conservative Party. There's an old political mantra that says elections are won and lost on the centre ground. That seemed to change when we voted to leave the EU. A new axis emerged of Leave and Remain, and instead of pursuing Leave as the voters told her to do, Theresa May embarked on a mission to produce the centrist version of Brexit. Half Leave, half Remain, with arguably the worst parts of both. Literally only a politician would have ever come up with it. And combined with a complete lack of negotiating skills, most of which a 5-year-old already understands but public servants do not, we ended up where we are today, on the threshold of leaving and with a new PM positioning himself for a general election. Leaving is a vote winner. That was proven in 2016, and it still staggers me that senior politicians of all parties didn't just rush to where the voters were, trying to claim them for their own. But Boris is going further than just espousing a love of leaving. He's articulating a set of views on the state and the economy that are extremely popular. I'm referring, of course, to his championing of capitalism and how it funds our treasured public services. He doesn't champion capitalism because it's virtuous or because of its morality. He wouldn't know how. He champions it because he knows a market economy is the only way to pay for the things that the vast, vast majority of this country think have to be run by the state. Schools, hospitals, roads. He probably knows, and this remains to be tested, that taxes need to be lowered and regulations slashed in order to encourage economic growth and allow innovation in the productive private sector. But he also knows that nobody questions these socialised parts of our lives like health and education. Politicians like May, Cameron and Miliband decided that the centre ground was shifting ever leftwards, mistaking the public's liberal views on society, age, sexual orientation, gender, sex, race, pick and equality, as signals that economic policies of the left should be steered towards too, instead of seeing that economic liberalism was the other form of freedom that people needed to get on with their lives. None of them ever put up a defence of capitalism, and this is where Boris differs. He embodies what I've taken to call a la Cartism, a pick and choose approach where the so-called best of both ends of that spectrum are taken, rather than merely charting a moderate middle ground of watered down policies. It's extreme versions of both ends, but a cunning mix that the country is familiar with. Of course you want your health service run and owned by the state. Of course government owns the roads. But what's new is this other of course. Let the market of everything else grow and generate the money I need to pay for it all. If you ask people what they believe the government should do, it's just that, which is why Boris is going to win the next election. The great irony is that if it wasn't for Brexit, then those 21 expelled ex-Tories would be queuing at number 10's door for a photo op and a ministerial car. For this is exactly the kind of centrism they advocate. But blinded by a short-term Remain stance, those MPs, along with the majority of the opposition parties and independents, are missing a huge opportunity and the potential realignment of our politics. Leavism and a la Cartism, it's where the country is.
Welcome to another edition of Sounding Board. If you're listening to it on a podcast, we're now on YouTube. We'll post the links underneath. And if you're watching it, we're also a podcast. So you can listen to this on your iPhone or Google phone or whatever it is.
And you'll be pleased to know I'm wearing a different jumper this time.
Podcast
listeners don't care about this, but you did point out on Twitter today that I was wearing exactly the same jumper in the previous two video editions.
I know, and I nearly waited to see if you'd wear it again so I could get a better photo of you wearing it for 3 occasions.
Well,
I thought you'd...
And the thought did cross my mind to always wear that jumper and do like a Zuckerberg, and it just be that's the only way I dress. But no, I'm not that weird.
No worries. Nick, that article you just read was one that you wrote a month, 4 or 5 weeks ago?
Yes, it's now middle of November. I wrote that at the beginning of October the 8th. And so there was a reference in there to the general election
which
not being
set. Hadn't been called yet.
Exactly. Well, I don't even like that term called anymore, because it used to be that the timing of a general election, other than there being a maximum of 5 years, or 4 years, whatever.
Well, it used to be a maximum of 4. Maximum 5.
But
most
tended
people
to happen
would be
somewhere.
after 4 years because it's a show of strength. And we don't need to. We're
We
not
don't need to
clinging on.
Exactly. But it was called. It was called by the Prime Minister of the day. It was their purview. And obviously there were things like losing confidence in the House of Commons and stuff like that, or rather the House of Commons losing confidence in the Prime Minister. But there was a power there that the Prime Minister had, which they no longer have, thanks to the likes of David Cameron, Nick Clegg, and good old Oliver Letwin with the Fixed Term Parliaments Act. So you can't call an election. But arguably we've needed one for quite some time. Other people more intelligent than us have talked about how it could have been linked to Brexit votes in such a way that meant that either Brexit got through or that there had been a more swift clear out of the House of Commons and then you go again. We finally got a general election coming on the 12th of December. I wrote this beforehand, seeing how Boris was positioning himself, seeing his conference speech. It was pretty much his conference speech that made me write that, but obviously he'd done other appearances and stuff as well. And then on November the 5th of all days, see what you're wearing there. Again, for our listener, you're wearing a hoodie.
With the V for Vendetta mask on it.
Yeah, a very iconic image now. And it's the mask that Anonymous used to wear, isn't it?
I think they still do. Yeah, they still do.
Which are like the hacker group or whatever, aren't they? But yeah, so remember the 5th of November, the House of Commons didn't get blown up, but it did get dissolved, ready for the general election. And I suppose the reason I started this podcast with reading that was I wanted to set the scene for whether or not we actually think that Boris is going to win this or not. There have been other things that have happened in the last few days. I mean, after our last recording a week ago, I said, I woke up in the middle of the night and it's like, Boris is the heir to Blair. That's what he is. He's more so than Cameron because he's out there really shilling for this and he's saying that you need the market economy and people getting rich is fine and all of that, but it's to do with paying for the public services.
So did you see his video that he released yesterday or whenever it was?
Yes, this is...
having a tea break, making himself a cup of tea, he's walking down the corridors and talking about Marmite and fish and chips. And
I thought this was political genius, frankly.
Very, very good.
Now, I've never been that much of a fan, particularly of Boris. I've always been wary of him becoming leader. It's a very low bar, and it has been a low bar for leaders of parties in recent years. But I thought this was political genius. I mean, he's so good in front of the camera anyway, isn't he? Just point the camera, start talking to him, and he'll jabber on, but in that kind of cuddly, friendly way. I mean, we could analyse this video to death, I suppose. I mean, I've seen stuff talking about, and I knew it would happen when I watched him make the cup of tea, and I think it's a genius stroke, man of the people. Make him look normal. He's making his own cup of tea, all of this.
Yeah, teabag in a cup as well, isn't it?
Teabag in a cup, but then there's the whole milking after. Do you take the teabag out first? Or do you just put milk in after? I've seen all this stuff on Twitter just talking about that, which I think is just genius stuff. He talks about Marmite, whether or not fish and chips or roast dinner was his favourite. To me, this is carefully crafted.
Well, it's trying to show. So every other, or the odd questions thrown in was like proper man of the people stuff. So there was, what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about that? Which biscuit do you like?
Yeah,
that kind of thing. So it's probably trying to show him as a man of the people. And the reason I brought this up was because he says exactly what you're talking about, or what you talked about in your article. In that, on one hand, we've got the free market, which is the best way of generating income.
Yes.
So we can pay.
It's the best way of spending it.
Public, for the public sector and for public services.
Yeah.
Which is that kind of that centrism that you were talking about.
So that video,
it's not quite the Rory Stewart centrism of like fascism and communism and bringing those two together.
No, not at all.
It's kind of socialism and free markets trying to somehow.
Well, which is why I think it's almost Blairism. There's because there's still a lot of freedom stuff in there, and I think Blair was actually quite good at communicating that. And there's still a lot of social freedom, but there's the
Mandelson as well. Mandelson was very good.
Oh, absolutely, and obviously so was Alistair Campbell. This is the new Labour. This is the new Labour message. This is Boris, to me, kind of pretending to be new Labour, or saying, hang on a minute, that won loads of votes, didn't it? So why don't we try that? And it's constantly going on about the NHS, constantly going on about police and schools. Well, it's the big three, aren't they? They're the big three. And what did you see in the background? I mean, obviously this was like campaign headquarters or whatever in that video, one assumes. And, you know, he walks past and there's a poster there saying, you know, 10,000 new police officers and this many doctors or whatever it is. And then he walks down the corner, you see another one exactly the same. Now, look, I get this. If you're having people campaign for you, you need to have the messages all around them and all that. But at the same time, this was a carefully crafted video where they needed to make sure that frames of him also had the key messages in the background and stuff as well. But what did you think about those questions, the more personal things? Because I thought they were very carefully crafted to go after particular types of voters.
Well, yeah. So there was the Marmite question, wasn't there? Which actually said yes, and that's always going to, you know, that's always going to divide people, but in like a fun way. I think it's almost like, you know, we've got the division on Brexit, and they're playing on division. That's how I saw it. They're all deliberately asking questions.
There were no right or wrong answer.
No, but questions where answers divide people anyway. You know, fish and chips roast dinner, Marmite, yes or no, this kind of thing.
Fish and chips and roast dinner is like you can't compare those two things, can you? But he was forced to take a stand on it. I think like Marmite, fish and chips, all of this, making a cup of tea in a cup. I think that was going after the North. I think that was Northern voters. I think call it shameless, call it good positioning, good tactics. That's what I think the bulk of that video was going after. It was going after the northern working class.
Okay, so and just I'm not Boris's biggest fan at all. But in his defence, do you remember when he brought tea out to those journalists on a tray?
Brilliant moment.
So, but that was the same kind of tea bag left in, and he obviously, you know, he made them.
And there was like 10 different mugs.
Yeah, he had like a smartest mug that I had from an Easter egg and all sorts. It was just like a real eclectic mix.
Exactly.
So I think he does make tea like that, unless he's been told whenever you make tea in front of a camera, this is how you do it. So,
but you can't fake natural, I don't think. And him, obviously he's told, you're going to walk down here, you're going to say this, you're going to go and you make a cup of tea, and you're going to go and do that. But he made the cup of tea. He didn't fumble around. There was no.
It wasn't
very much
about eating sandwich, was it?
No, but I very much doubt that was 10 takes or whatever. He went in. He grabbed the mug. He grabbed it. Yeah, and it was just everything about the. It was like he'd done it 1,000 times.
Well, he knew what he was doing. He knew where everything was. It was just.
It was. But the way you lean in a kitchen to get certain things is you pivoting because you know where I need to get something from over there. I need to get something from over there. And it was the lean in and get the and because he's talking to someone, I'm just going to get the hot water over here. But then it's just I need to get the milk. Everything about it said natural to me, and I honestly don't care if he did do it 1,000 times. It's very, very clever politics. He's trying to win. I thought this was a very effective way of doing it. But you're right. It had. I wouldn't say it was the hallmark of it, but it was notable, which was the ramp up at the end, which is public services paid for by a strong economy and the free market and all that.
But it was all about, so we've got, obviously mentioned the division with Brexit.
Yes.
Leave or remain. So they were asking questions like Marmite, yes or no. But again, he posed another question, whereas it's like, it's me or Corbyn.
Yes.
It's this centre ground or socialism. And that was the choice.
I think that is the choice he put in that, and it's kind of how the campaign is going at the moment. But don't you think that, and I mean the point in my blog post that I read out at the beginning there was that this is where the country is. The country is convinced that schools, hospitals, roads have to be provided by the state. So he's doing what works. He's doing what is arguably politically savvy. But with all the spending commitments, with all of the, Sajid Javid coming out and saying we're going to spend this amount on infrastructure, and it's all investment, which just means spending, and it's extra on the NHS, and it's extra on schools, and it's extra on the police. When shown against someone else who'll just spend more, doesn't it look the same? Labour are out there saying they'll spend even more on the same things for the same reasons.
Well, yeah, without, and I think what Labour actually said was, whatever they spend, we will spend more,
Yeah.
regardless of what it is.
Yeah.
And there's no way they can ever prove how they're ever going to get this way. So it's just they're just empty promises.
And I
you
suppose
can do that as a politician.
In that respect, them not championing the free market is a difference. So I get that. But the only other difference seems to be calling him a socialist and saying he's got terrorist friends and making it all about Corbyn. Again, which is arguably a short term.
That should be enough.
It should be enough, but it's not.
It doesn't appear to be though, does it?
You know.
There's anti-Semitism, there's his terrorist friends, there's him being on the side of everybody but Britain for 35 years.
Yeah. The position on Brexit, if you can call it a position.
Well, yeah, the lack of a position on Brexit. He's just been flip-flopping on that.
He flips-flops on everything.
He's still trying to sit on the fence with Brexit, and that we'll negotiate a deal, and then we'll campaign against our own deal. It's.
But don't you think that a very clear, rather than make it about managerialism, which we've said in the past is a serious problem with politics at the moment.
But that's what Boris is doing now. I think he's like,
that's what I'm saying.
I'm the best manager. Of course, the economy needs to be managed, but we need me doing it, and not this guy.
Yes, they're making it about competence, and it shouldn't be about competence. And I never know whether to use the word ideology. You've picked up on this before by saying actually there is an absence of ideology if you take the state away from the market. Yeah, the market is not an ideology. The market is just what happens if you leave people alone.
Well, yeah, it's just everyone can come up with their own personal ideology, their own morals, and whatever happens is, whatever happens. So I've mentioned that as being like myself having a lack of ideology.
Yeah,
I might be capitalist, for example, but that doesn't mean that I want everybody else to be that. If you want to live in a commune with all of your mates, fine. That doesn't bother me in the slightest. I just don't want coercion. I don't want control. I want everybody to be able to make their own decisions. I've also talked about a lack of ideology in both the left and the right, and for our podcast listeners, that
air quotes
in the left and the right, in that they're not really pure. Well, not anywhere near pure left or right anymore, because right-wing politicians will champion state-run education, state-run health, state-owned roads. And you've got your left-wingers who will champion regulation and the nanny state and banning things and customs unions and all these things. So there's no real you can't look at someone's policies and think okay, they're a clear right-wing party, or they're a clear left-wing party, or they're a clear liberal party, or whatever. And you can't even if you looked at you looked at the Conservative Party, you'd read their manifesto, which is presumably going to come out in a couple of days.
Soon, yeah.
And normally with for a Conservative Party, you'd be able to think, have a look at it and think, yes, these are Conservative policies. But they're just like the last manifesto was all over the place.
Dire, yeah,
all over the place. Theirs and Labour's have been a little bit like that for years now. You don't think, okay, this is proper Conservative stuff.
But this was the other point I made in the blog post, which is this shift. To me, is it ever leftwards, or is it actually just ever statewards?
Statewards, I think, because the regular, on the left, you've got more. The NHS is getting bigger, and they're putting more in education. But then on the right, you've got like regulation, which is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They're kind of
the Quango
more
state.
And more. Yeah. The kind of the
that's right wing.
Yes, it is, but that's growing just as big as the left wing stuff.
I do find it funny though when you see people on social media and commentators and and all this talking about how hard right the Conservative Party is, or how hard right, far right. I never quite know what the difference between hard and far is in this sense. That Boris and the entire cabinet are, and since I'm on the Twitter now, I occasionally challenge these people to actually tell me these policies. What are these far right policies you speak of? And I'm not even saying they don't exist in some fashion, but you can't say that all this stuff. Boris shouting about the NHS and schools isn't far right. It's arguably not right at all. Right wing
not
at all.
Not in the slightest.
And likewise, I'll happily challenge people talking about how the Labour Party are far left, if their policies aren't particularly leftwards either. Now, I think on the whole they are.
I think they are now. A couple of years ago, you could have got away with that. I think
No, if we were talking about Blair again, there would have been this
Brown, or even Miliband. To this was reasonably centrist.
Yeah,
he was definitely left of centre, but he wasn't. He's no Corbyn of the
price caps and things like this.
Yeah. But that's right wing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
He had. I think with Ed Miliband, he picks right wing policies for the same reason that someone like Boris would pick left wing policies like the NHS, because he doesn't see a way around it. He thinks that's as good as he's going to get. So
Right.
Ed Miliband would probably nationalise the energy industry if he could, but he knows that's never going to fly. So what's the next best thing?
Regulate it to hell.
We'll regulate it to within an inch of his life. Boris may want to have more private sector involvement in healthcare, but he knows that's never going to fly either. So as a politician in Britain,
Yes.
you have to champion the NHS. That's it.
Yeah.
It's a given. You won't last 5 minutes if you talk about even reducing the scope of the NHS.
Yeah.
Or even if you're not reducing the scope and you're saying, okay, maybe the public sector isn't quite as good as the private sector in these areas. Let's employ the private sector while still paying for it by the state. That you wouldn't last 5 minutes doing that either. So I think a lot of these politicians are just thinking, well, this is as good as I'm going to get, so I'll be a little bit more right wing. Which is why I think they're not really ideological. They just want to get in power.
Exactly. Managerialism again. I'm the competent one. The other one isn't incompetent. But you see, this is why I think there's a chance now. Whereas I said in the blog post that this is why Boris is going to win, and I think there's a big chance that that's going to happen, and that actually most of the public are in that position I've just described and that we've just outlined, of very much being accepting of the views that these are the things that you deliver by the state. And that he's more trustworthy, regardless of how much he lies as a politician. He's more trustworthy than the other ones. And at least he's saying, I'll get out of the way in the other bits that I like, which is the free market. That's probably where most people are.
So do you think, though, that is more or less important than Brexit? Which is obviously the two things that people
What do you mean? Just not having a socialist in power compared to Brexit? Or the mythical.
Well, we're talking about the general election.
Yeah.
And who's going to win?
Yeah.
So obviously, on people's minds, on the one hand, there's going to be, well, who can best manage the economy? I hate that term. Nobody can manage an economy, but who's going to be least worst or whatever?
Yeah.
Who do you want in charge? Is it your Boris centrism who champions free markets but also pays for everything?
Yeah.
Or is it Corbyn? So you've got that, but then you've also got Brexit, so that these hard Remainers, who are they going to vote for? Are they going to think I need to vote for Boris because the country's going to go to the dogs, or are they going to vote for I can't remember her name,
Jo Swinson.
Jo Swinson.
Yeah, her. That's what she refers to herself now and everything, isn't it?
Yeah, unless it's on. Have you seen the bus?
Yeah,
it's not the Liberal Democrats.
It's Jo Swinson.
Jo Swinson's Liberal Democrats.
Well, she's just. Right, let's just divert for a moment. She's just
Hillary
taking everything
Clinton,
out of the Hillary playbook.
Yeah,
everything.
How well did that work out for her?
I know. At least pick a winning strategy.
I know. She didn't pick Thatcher, did she?
No.
She won 3 elections.
No, nonsense.
Anyway,
that's enough about the Liberal Democrats. Look, how important is Brexit? That's a difficult one. I'm not going to sit here and predict the outcome of the election, not least of which because
of the last time you predicted.
Yeah, I'm done. I am done predicting elections. I was really good at it.
You've had like 4 in a row that were good and one that was.
I'm done. Look, I'm giving my political punditry here, okay? And there are splits on both sides. Now, in the last couple of days, certainly in the last week since we first talked about this, Farage has come out and said that they won't contest the 317 seats that the Tories won in the 2017 election. That is significant, but not significant enough.
It's not because they're still targeting the marginal seats that the Conservatives need
to get a majority
through.
Exactly. So it's not as simple as that. But like you just highlighted there, on the Remain side, who do you vote for? The Liberal Democrats have the most transparent position. but they've got no chance of being in power.
Presumably, you'd say, okay, you're an arch Remainer. If you want to stop Brexit, you've got to pick the party that, other than the Brexit Party, that is most likely to beat the Tories, surely. So if you're in a seat,
but you're highlighting exactly the problem.
It's got to be
by seat.
It's got to be tactical voting
Absolutely.
for Remainers,
and it's got to be tactical voters voting for Leavers as well.
Yeah, but there are only like 6 or 7 seats that the Brexit Party have got any chance of winning. I think Leavers just got to vote Conservative.
I agree, but they won't. There is a hardcore bunch of them. I mean, UKIP's vanished, evaporated.
But if you look at the polls, the Brexit Party are only on like 5 or 6% of the vote, so they're vanishing.
Yes, and they could. And so again, I don't want this to be about making predictions. They could vanish. They could go. This could be the end of it. And if, let's be very clear, if Conservatives get in with a decent enough majority, even if it's like 20 or 30, get Brexit done, more air quotes, and we leave with a free trade deal. He sticks to the promises made, which is the reason that Farage is standing down those candidates in those 300 odd constituencies, which is no extension to the I don't know, what do they call it now? Implementation period, transition period, delay is what it is. And a proper free trade agreement, Canada, Super Canada, plus, or whatever they want to call it. If that happens, then their work is done, the Brexit Party. Farage's work is done. That is out. It is out. It is free trading. It is past any other nonsense. In the scheme of things, I know it costs 39 billion quid. Well, more actually, based on...
Have you noticed people aren't talking about that at all anymore?
It's not in the campaign, is it? Yeah.
Even the Brexit Party aren't making a thing of that.
Yeah, interesting.
You know, you think
they have been pulling the deal apart.
They have, but that's it. They haven't been pulling the cost of it. They could also say, you didn't even get us a rebate of 5 billion quid, Boris.
Right.
Thatcher would have come back with, you know.
But again, it's because the talk has now turned to money. Now, I have been a believer in the past that the electorate goes through these cycles of wanting to spend money and not wanting to spend money. By money, the electorate's money, and having the politicians spend it on their behalf. I mean, it is obviously a crazy thing that we don't agree with. But during the Blair years, I think people wanted. I think the vast majority of people did want money to be ploughed in to hospitals and schools. And so we all got new hospitals and schools, and that's what happened. And then they get to the point where the economy's bust and the coffers are empty, and what did Liam Byrne write? There is no money left. And so that's when the Tories are voted in again. I think we're back there again, though. Not at the point where the money's gone. I think we're back there again, where all politicians think that all the electorate want is just more money to be spent.
Yeah, the disappointing...
And so the money, the 39 billion is a drop in the ocean compared to what will be spent on the NHS and schools and hospitals.
But the disappointing thing is, though, that we haven't gone through that period where we sorted out the economy in the meantime, which is traditionally what Conservative parties tend to do.
Yes.
Is they come in, they inherit an absolute mess, and they get it to slightly less of a mess, and then Labour come in again.
I mean, it is slightly less of a mess. But, austerity is not the word to use to describe it.
Yeah, no, not at all. And if you compare what Thatcher inherited in 79, and then, what Blair inherited in 97.
And the tax reforms that happened during that time. The size of our tax code, and again, Osborne was one of those ones that came in saying that they'll reform tax. I remember before he died, he talked about flatter taxes.
He did.
And he doubled the tax code.
Which had already been tripled under Gordon Brown. So
exactly. Now, did you see that graph? Dominic Frisby drew a graph. It was literally a hand-drawn graph.
No.
And it's like, number of lines in, number of words in the Bible, and the complete works of Shakespeare, and stuff like that. Was it the Hutton Report or the Iraq Report, something like that? And then you've got UK tax code, like 10 million.
It's something
lines,
like
10 million
it's over 10 times the tax code, isn't it, or something?
So
10 times the size of the Bible, should I say?
Yeah. UK tax code, 10 million. Hong Kong tax code, less than 150,000. Now, 150,000 is still
a lot.
A lot. But in comparison, 10 million. No wonder nobody understands the tax system. No wonder it's full of loopholes.
Well, so how long would that take you to read? If you wanted to read the tax code, that would take you years. That's not understanding it. That's just reading it. And you have to, by the end of it, you'd have to read it again. It'd be like painting the fourth bridge.
Well, it's going to have changed.
You know, by the time you finished it, not only will it have already doubled, probably, but you'd have to, even if it was absolutely static, you'd have to read it again because you'd have no idea what you read 5 years ago.
And this is where, look, I mean...
So lawyers love it. Lawyers...
Oh, of course. But, you know, for all our hope of just getting less in the state and removing entire things from state control, if we had 10%, frankly, even a 20% flat tax rate, think how much simpler that would be. There would be no question anymore. No, you pay tax on it. You pay 10, you pay 20%. That's it. No exceptions. No one gets a free ride.
It doesn't matter how you earn it, whether it's through dividends or whether it's through your income or whatever. It's like.
But it also, there's none of this. We don't like that, so it taxes more. We do like that, so we tax it less. I mean, that essentially is all the tax code is. We like this more. We don't like this more, and we use tax to incentivise and disincentivize. But think how much simpler it would be. I mean, you could basically fire most of HMRC because they wouldn't need to do anything. It would just be that flat rate. It would free up. There would be so little red tape, and as you say, the lawyers and the tax code specialists that you have to hire to navigate it.
I mean, in Farage's defence, I'm sure a few years ago he was talking about having a 25% flat tax for everything.
Yeah,
which obviously isn't our ideal, but it's a million times better than what we have now.
But bringing it back to the main kind of subject, the money is just huge now, and so 39 billion doesn't sound like a lot anymore. If I'm also promising 50 billion over 10 years and another 40 billion over here, another 10 billion over here, another 100 billion over there, it's just pocket change. And in fact, they're using it because there's been an acceptance publicly. Actually, people have accepted the 39 billion as a cost of getting Brexit done. If you look at the polls and you see that actually most people do want Brexit in some form, then that means that they're accepting of the 39 billion. Excellent. I can spend 39 billion. That means I can spend another 39 billion over here and another 39 billion over here. So you could argue that because of the Brexit deal and the payment, it's allowed them all to go, that's spending big money now, am I? You're letting me spend it on this, so I can spend it on other things as well. And this is the problem. The problem is two spending parties. And so whether you say...
We've had that for a while, though.
I know, and I'm saying it's only moving in that direction. This is the problem. I think the Conservative Party had an opportunity here to really come out for the case for freedom.
Well, I was hoping for that because after the wishy-washy years of Cameron and Osborne, which was just... It was just Gordon Brown again, basically. It was tax and spend.
Gordon Brown Lite.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't have anything that you could actually call austerity. There was a little bit of low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
But the amount of spending they were doing was proper Gordon Brown stuff. So I'm thinking after that, okay, maybe Boris is going to distinguish himself from that.
Well, May was worse. May was interventionist.
Yeah.
As well. So lots of really right
massive,
stuff.
Yeah, nanny state.
Yeah.
But I hoped that Boris, with his supposedly Ayn Rand libertarian cabinet, Sajid Javid, etc.,
Priti Patel,
all these people who are supposedly for smaller government,
people who've written books saying we should merge departments and get rid of bits and all this.
Yeah, proper tax cutters. So I was hoping that they would be like a refreshing change, and they would actually start reducing the size of the state.
Yeah,
but they don't appear to be doing that at all. They're playing the Labour Party at their own game. Oh, we can. You want spending? We can do spending. And we'll talk about free markets a little bit, so we can justify the spending, but we can still do spending.
And this is the problem: is that the left and the Labour Party have defined the turf that they fight on. And they must be rubbing their hands with glee You can argue actually that the reason that Theresa May had certain interventionist policies were because of Ed Miliband. And even actually some of the policies.
So their manifesto was very similar to what Ed Miliband was talking about, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And that's just not a good model for anything, is it? And without that contrast, if it's just about how much you spend and how good you are at managing it, I don't think it's a good argument that the other guy's not as good. I just don't. And I don't think it's a good argument that spending less than the other side, without changing the argument, as you've put it there, is a particular vote.
Well, so
I think there's a real danger.
So they missed an opportunity, and I was really hopeful that they would, kind of have this specific change in 2010 when kind of Cameron got in, and they missed the boat there.
Yes.
They probably missed the opportunity. When May had her election, I could kind of understand her.
The 2017
election. I could kind of understand her not really doing that and just making it, a bit more. A bit more about Brexit. I mean, obviously she just screwed up everything, but I could understand her not wanting to rock the boat too much. But Boris with this one, it's just it's like the opportunity's there, and it's just whizzing over his head.
Yeah.
And he's just,
if anyone could articulate that message, it's him. And certainly, yeah. And then you bring along the likes of Gove, another good communicator, and Raab and Patel and Liz Truss. She loves. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with her way of articulating it, but at least she's a free marketeer, and she likes this stuff, and she would talk about it if taken off the leash. But in fact, I haven't even heard from her in the election campaign yet so far. I kind of don't mind if they just put Boris out there, but it's got to be on the right stuff. And the danger is that they've just missed an opportunity now, and that people will start questioning whether or not they should, in the seats that the Brexit Party is contesting, they might be saying, is this freedom-loving enough? And I might as well just vote for it on a single issue and put my and still protest again, like I protested in 2016. In fact, maybe I was never a Conservative or a Labour voter, but I voted in 2016 to leave because I wanted to put one in the eye. What's the best way of doing that again? To vote for the Brexit Party. So there's a chance still that the Brexit Party take votes away from the Conservatives, stop them getting their majority, and we're right back where we started.
But yeah, because if you look at the polls, the Brexit Party are on sort of 5, 6, 7%, depending on who's polling, which sounds like that's nothing. That's nothing at all. However, there are lots of seats that are decided
literally that margin
by 5 or 6%.
Yeah,
which could be enough.
Yeah.
To to elect a Liberal Democrat or a Labour MP or someone awful like that.
Yeah.
Not that I'm really advocating for Conservative MPs at all, but they are, and the least worst.
Well, look, the only way to get Brexit is seat by seat, and if you don't have specific polling, accurate polling even for your seat, then how are you going to know whether or not it's worth voting for either the Brexit Party if you're for Leave, or for Labour, or the Lib Dems if you want Remain? Both sides have got to employ tactical voting unless it becomes simpler. And the only way for it to become simpler on the Leave side is for the Brexit Party to stand down completely, or to literally stand in 10 or 20 seats.
I mean, there are the seats that the Brexit Party have a chance of winning. Boris could potentially do a deal with those seats.
He's not going to. He hasn't done a deal now. He's not going to do a deal.
Yeah, I don't think he will. But he could.
Farage has been out saying very specifically this was a unilateral decision. This wasn't a deal that they did. They came to this conclusion and they decided to do it.
But Boris could do a deal where he says, "Look, we won't stand candidates in." I don't think he will. I don't think it's a good idea because the Conservative Party has got a huge history. They're a massive party, and Brexit Party been around 6 months. So to do a deal with a party that's only been around 6 months seems a bit daft. But he could say, "We won't stand candidates in these 7 or 8 seats
as long as you vote for the Brexit deal."
As long as you vote for our deal, and you don't put candidates in these marginals that we are targeting.
That would be the proper deal. You would have to do it. It would have to be then like.
Yeah, it would be seat for seat. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, exactly.
He'll never do it.
It's not going to happen. Isn't it ironic though that if you take Leave and Remain out of this, that the 21 ex-Tory MPs that were expelled as part of the Brexit deal. This is their dream. This type of centrism, isn't it? Your Gawks and your Hammonds and your Rudds. This championing of the public sector in the way that Boris does it. That type of centrism. That's the type of Conservative Party they want to be part of.
But it's that kind of Brexit derangement syndrome that they've got, where it's such an issue for them.
Yeah.
And they're such ardent Remainers that it doesn't matter
at
all what Boris says.
Did you hear Gawk has decided to run as an independent?
Has he?
Yeah. And when pro-Remain, when the Lib Dems were asked if they would stand down their candidate, they're like, no.
Well, yeah. So even though he's pro-Remain, he voted for May's deal, I believe.
Yeah, because he was part of Canada.
2 or 3 times.
Yeah. So I don't blame them. I'm not.
So you can understand the Liberal Democrats thinking, hang on a second, you voted for Brexit.
Yeah.
Even though you and I would not call that deal Brexit at all, the Lib Dems would.
So I think there's a chance that we have a hung parliament again. I think that Boris could fluff it. I think Boris could fluff it because people would just go, "Oh no, I just want people to spend." They're not winning. They're not winning the argument for less government.
If they want people to spend, are they really going to vote for Corbyn?
I'm saying that's been the problem.
If anybody else was leader of the Labour Party, I would probably say, I think you're right. But I think Corbyn is that toxic that I don't think, even if you want greater spending. I mean, you've got ex-Labour MPs who are saying, I know Boris at all, but please don't vote for Corbyn.
I agree. It is different this time to 2017 in that those former Labour members and MPs are being very vocal about it because it was too close to call that time. I get that. But I just think, why is it close? Why it shouldn't be close? It should be a walk in the park.
The same way it shouldn't have been close in 2017 either. May was like 30 or 40 points ahead, and she squandered all of them in like 6 weeks. By being an absolute muppet.
The vote share right now in the polls is basically the vote share of the 2017 election. So going, hey, yeah, look, Boris is on 42%, and Labour are down there. That was the vote share. Again, you've got to remember, we've got gerrymandered constituencies here. We've got constituencies where it's way easier for Labour to win than it is for Conservatives. Now, yes, it's all fought on the marginals, but percentage-wise, you look at the polls, there isn't much of a gap, and that's the problem. And look, I would love it. I genuinely would love it if a party won 50% of the vote. Now, it hasn't happened since like Baldwin or something. You know, it's happened like once in the last 100 years or something. But an actual majority of votes, more than 50% of votes, would be quite something.
I mean, so they were talking about that happening in 2017, weren't they? You know, when May was getting
when it looked ridiculous,
43%, 44%, 45%.
Like a Reagan election.
Yeah, and people were saying, "How
winning 50 states, this kind of thing." Yeah, I believe Boris has within him the ability to do that, but not with the current campaign. Look, if it turns out I'm wrong, I'm not going to eat my hat. But I'll be happy to be proved wrong in this sense. In this case, I certainly don't want there to be a socialist in power. I think that the people in the Labour Party, other than being a lot of them being quite laughable as people, very, very scary and sinister at the top. But where's the party that I can truly vote for? There isn't one. And this choice between two statist parties is not good. And the more that they position themselves now, the way that Boris says free market and treasured public services, he's putting them together like they should be 50-50. Like there should be this magic line. The magic line is 50%, and as long as the one half of the economy pays for the other half of the economy, then I as leader get to control this other half. We're not there, but we're getting on for that now. We're not at 30-35%. We're at 40-odd% of the economy is the public sector. That's not where I think it should be. Not least of which because it would be better delivered. All of those services would be better delivered. Nobody's arguing for it. And so it's just how much socialism do you want? Not whether you should have socialism or not. How much socialism you should have. And whereas Boris is going, oh, you can't trust this guy, he's a socialist. You're a socialist. That's what you're doing. You're just being a socialist for these bits.
That's the way the Overton window is moving, isn't it?
This is the problem.
If you look at the polls on nationalising, like banks, energy companies, trains, everyone is moving leftwards.
Those polls are scary. They're in the 60-odd%, aren't they? Those polls. But I think that's because they're just not being shown the alternative. That's what I lament, even though I think that it might work as a strategy.
So I'm going to ask you again. I know you don't want to answer. I'm going to ask you again. Is Boris going to win?
You just want me to make a prediction?
Yes.
Well, do you think he's going to win?
I think he will win by between 30 to 40 seats. That's my prediction.
Oh, really? You're in the kind of Toby Young kind of school of thought.
Is that what he's
this thing? Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure what I want to happen. Because it's just I don't like any of them. I don't like anything any of them are doing.
Yep.
The Brexit deal isn't great. Tory policies aren't great. Labour policies aren't great. Liberal Dem policies aren't great. It's I don't want Labour in charge because they are the worst.
Well, it's not right. But this was about predictions. You're not asking me what I want. You're asking me, and I'd ask.
So you. 30. I think 30 to 40 seats. Even though it's pretty. I'm not sure.
I think this far out in the campaign, I think there's still time for all sorts of things to happen that can change this. Of course. But your prediction right now, based on right now, is this your classic if the election was held tomorrow kind of thing? Because I think there are shy Tories. I think that the polls aren't going to show all of the people that will vote.
Yeah, but I think there's going to be. I think the polls are showing. I think there will be some shy Tories.
Yeah.
But I also think there's ample time for Boris to make a few screw ups, which will kind of. So I think the polls probably go down, and then at the end, when people get into the ballot box, they'll think, oh, I can't vote for Corbyn or the Brexit Party, whatever, and they'll vote for Boris.
I think there is a chance, after everything I've said today, where I'm worried that he's not making it a stark enough choice. I think actually there is a chance that if he wins big. That it's back up to where...
So it's sort of 60, 70 seat majority, do you think?
90 odd. I think there's a proper chance of that. If people just buy into the happy warrior of Boris, of him just being upbeat and positive about things, and unapologetic about the market, and unapologetic about the state-run services. I think there's a lot of people who will just go, oh yes, Boris though, isn't it? There's even Labour candidates who, if you look back at their history on social media, they're cheering on Boris like 3 or 4 years ago, and now they're running as a Labour candidate. Boris has something. Boris won in London. Boris is a winner. Twice.
In one of the left-wing areas.
Boris is a winner. I'm worried that the strategy doesn't work, but at the same time, there's a reason I wrote that blog post a month ago. I think he might have the magic formula, not of the economy, but of winning the election. And in which case, actually, we might be set on a 100-seat majority. In which case, not that I would like the Conservative Party with all of their spending and all of that, and having free rein on stuff. I don't like that. I would love to see the fruition of a certain £3 vote that I made in 2015, and the destruction of the Labour Party, and it to implode, and for these people at the top to be consigned to the dustbin of history. That's what I'd like.
Okay, so on that note, thank you for watching and listening to Sounding Board. Again, please subscribe wherever you're listening to. Take a look on YouTube and subscribe there as well. We don't need to support us. I know lots of people use these kind of bits at the end of podcasts to say, please donate to my Patreon and all that kind of stuff.
You don't do this for free.
Just if you like us, please share the videos and podcasts and send them to your friends. And thank you very much.
Thank you.